All right, what's going on, guys? Dr. Matt here. We're going to go over some of the things we did during the mobility seminar over at CrossFit Providence. So just to start off, I want to give a quick intro of who I am. So I coach here at CrossFit Providence on Thursdays in the morning. I've been doing CrossFit since 2017. More recently, I've been getting really into some of the longer distance, Ironman, triathlons, marathon running. But have always been doing CrossFit and have really loved it as a form of training for myself, and noticed it just in clients and other people how much it can make a difference. So that's my little spiel on that. So a little bit more about me. I used to live in Newport, Rhode Island. Now I'm living in Providence. I was an undergrad at UMass Amherst. I did exercise science there, and then I went to grad school at URI for physical therapy. I own Strength and Sport Physical Therapy, which has two locations. One is in Portsmouth over at a gym called Bullfrog Fit. The other one is in Providence at Rise Strength. Used to be out here at Across Providence. So I have two different locations I work out of, and I'm just a solo provider. So work with people one-on-one for mostly athletic style injuries for physical therapy, but I see all types of people. So some of the athletes that I've worked with in the past include runners, triathletes, crossfitters, powerlifters, yogis, field sport athletes, meaning like football, soccer, the traditional team sport athletics. Past few years, I've really dove into the sports niche in the PT field. I've worked with people from all levels, including youth athletes to professional and everywhere in between, from semi-pro, high school, college, people in the military, gym goers, people who love fitness, but also people who have never been inside of a gym and are looking to get over their injuries and get more into fitness and healthy lifestyle. So we're going to start off with three main talking points. All right, first concept I want to go over is the concept of mobility. What is mobility? Why does it matter? Why does it affect your athletic performance? Why does it affect your ability to stay injury-free? So the idea frame that I like to borrow from is from Kelly Starrett. If you've heard of him, he is a PT in the physical therapy and CrossFit worlds. He was an early adopter of getting physical therapy into CrossFit, and really became a celebrity or a person of high regard in both the CrossFit and physical therapy worlds. He got really, really popular with his use of the foam roller, really popular with the use of the cross ball and soft tissue techniques. But one of the concepts that he created was the concept of the I3 model. So the letter I times 3. And that's just kind of a cute little way to remember why mobility matters. So the first I is incomplete mechanics. So what that means is basically you don't have full range of motion of your shoulder, or you don't have full range of motion of your hip. Something is lacking. You're not able to use your joint or your body part to the fullest ability that you're supposed to for the given activity. So for example, if you're trying to do pull-ups, but you don't have full overhead motion, then there's incomplete mechanics going on there. Things aren't moving optimally. Now, why does this matter? Well, over time, the theory is if you're not moving properly or fully, then it could lead to an incident, meaning that you get kind of a nag or an ache or a pain. You're doing pull-ups, let's use that same example, and then you kind of get a shoulder tweak, or you feel it in your bicep, or feel it in your tricep, and you kind of just brush it off. A few days go by and don't really think anything else of it. So little tweaks here and there. Now that's the second I, is that incident, those little tweaks. The third I is an injury. So you get enough of those little incidences that they build up over time and kind of chip away at you, and that can lead to an injury. Something that I fully got some tendonitis that's happened, or I fully strained a muscle, or worse. You can have other things that can happen, but over time is these incomplete mechanics. If you think about it like a big recycling sign, the big one arrow points to the next in a big circle. The incomplete mechanics can lead to that incident, which can lead to that injury, which can further lead to more incomplete mechanics that you're all right, now I'm even more stiff. Now I move even worse, So that's kind of the idea of why does this mobility matter? Why does it matter that we have full range of motion and can move well? All right, now the second big concept I want to bring up is the concept of movement. Just movement in general. Now, this concept I've kind of taken to be my own, but I've borrowed mostly from the CrossFit Level 1 seminar. And the idea or the concept that they've come up with is that movement is inherently safer than lack of movement. So the example you might use for this is, let's say you have some knee injuries, you have some foot injuries, you have arthritis, something going on, and you want to choose between two things. You want to choose between sitting on the couch all day, or you want to choose between going and trying to run a 5K. Now, obviously, there might be some other options that are better for you, but if you only have those two options, which option is going to be better? And most people would say, like, okay, the running's, as much as a lot of us are CrossFitters don't love running, the running is going to be the better option. So movement is inherently safer than lack of movement. Now, the reason I like to bring this up after bringing up the first concept is to not be paralyzed by the fear of perfection from the start. So don't be paralyzed by the fear of, I have incomplete mechanics. If I don't fix those mechanics first, then I can't start working out. No, that's not the case. You have to be able to put that perfection to the side. Know that it's always something you can work on, but always know that movement is safer than not moving. Another example of this that I like to show is that if you're on Instagram and you see Instagram coaches, people who like to look at somebody's form and say, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that, you're not pulling enough, you're not straightening your elbows enough. Sure, that's all good and fine, but the Instagram is a highlight reel, and you're not getting a good snapshot on where that person was last week or a year ago or 5 years ago. You don't know where their line is for improvement, for progression. It would be almost the same thing as saying, like, look at these little kids playing pee-wee football. Their form is trash. They don't know how to run. They don't know how to jump. It's like, of course, like we're all on a movement spectrum. We're all working on trying to get better. Nobody is going to be moving with perfection. Even at the highest level, there's always something to work on. So I think we need to make sure that we are not getting paralyzed by overanalysis here. All right, and the third concept that I want to bring up is the concept of stability. Now, this is another concept that I borrowed from someone else. I know you see a pattern here. I'm not making things up. I'm just borrowing them or stealing them from other people who are smarter than I am or mentors in the field. But this one's borrowed from Quinn Hennock. He's really, really smart PT who has a big focus in Olympic weightlifting, but also just fitness in general. And one concept that he's been really known for is that we need to load the tissues. We need to strengthen progressively, especially when it comes to rehab. And stability is a huge component of this. So, the idea is like, if you build it, they will come, Field of Dream style. So you got to build, you got to load, progress. So we're not going to be focusing too much on this during this course today, but just know that this is such a crucial piece that I would feel like if I left it out, I'd be leaving you guys with a lack of knowledge here. But loading, progression of the exercise, progression of the rehab is going to be very important, and this is especially important for those who you're working through some of these mobility drills, and if you're hypermobile or you're hyper flexible, and a lot of these drills come very easy to you, then this might be the area where you need to focus on the most to prevent injury, to maximize performance. Yes, there's going to be some good foam rolling and soft tissue techniques that you need every now and again when something gets tight. But if you're hypermobile and you're hyperflexible, working on a lot of stretching and a lot of mobility techniques for flexibility obviously isn't going to be your best bet. It's going to be more on the stability standpoint. So just to further emphasize that, once you do gain mobility in any one position, you probably don't have a lot of stability in that new range of motion. So you need to own your positions, and this can be really said for a lot of these like wide leg hip positions, like in the sumo stance or in the overhead positions. If just because you have that position doesn't mean that you necessarily are incredibly competent in it. So you really need to work on owning those positions, especially if you do have hypermobility, which comes through stability. And then just keep loading, keep progressively loading. All right, now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this mobility seminar. So we're going to start joint by joint, limb by limb, and we're going to start with the low back. And I organize these based on what I see most in the CrossFit world. So what injuries do I see most? What tightness do I see most? What areas of mobility do I see have the most need? So starting with the low back, it's just such a common injury, common place for pain. Low back pain is the number one cause of a musculoskeletal pain across all populations, and then definitely CrossFitters are no different. You see it from time to time. I do want to take a brief second just to say that CrossFit over the past 10, 15 years has unfortunately come to be known as a very injury-prone sport. However, that was really based on some early studies from the NSCA. Unfortunately, I do love the NSCA, but they did put out some studies that were intentionally trying to show injury in CrossFit due to a number of different reasons, motives, competition, money, business, and they were found guilty of it, and they were in court had to redact what they had said about CrossFit early on. However, once something is said and rumors get out, that's kind of how things go, and now it's just been stuck with CrossFit, unfortunately. Although plenty of studies have come out since then showing that CrossFit is not a very injury-prone sport at all. If you look at CrossFit compared to any team sport, soccer, football, basketball, it is significantly lower risk of injury across the board. So very safe style of fitness to do. So don't let the theory or the old saying of CrossFit gives injuries deter you from doing CrossFit. It's just been shown to be not true. So I wanted to start off by saying that. All right, so for this first technique for the low back, we're going to use a quick test, a test retest. This is a nice thing to do before any mobility test to kind of see if you've made a change. So we're going to stand with our legs locking out straight, and then we are just reaching down towards our toes and just taking note on where we feel that. Do we feel it in the hamstrings? Do we feel it in the calves? Are we feeling it in the low back? Are we feeling the hips? Ideally, where you do want to feel this is in the hamstrings, and that's going to be the ideal muscle, which is going to be put on stretch. If you do have a lot of tension in the nervous system, you might feel it in the calves. If the back's a little sore, you might feel it in the back. And ideally, you want to be able to touch down your toes, your hands to your toes, or your hands to the ground without too much difficulty. And if you are having a lot of trouble here, you're probably having some tightness in your hamstrings. Now, the reason this is important is that if you're doing something like a deadlift or maybe even a toes to bar or Olympic lifting, something that requires a lot of hamstring mobility, and your hamstrings are not allowing you to get there, you're going to compensate and use a different part of your body to achieve the task, aka your low back. So you might be overdoing it with your low back because your hamstrings aren't allowing you to. It's something we see all the time in PT, hip mobility, hamstring mobility. If it's not up to par, something else is going to have to do the work for you. That something else is your low back. So making sure hips and hamstrings are mobile is important. So yes, doing that first test, see where you're at. And then we're going to try some of those mobility techniques. So first one is foam rolling for the hamstrings. So two different ways we can do this. We can do it with the foam roller itself, or we can use a lacrosse ball using a very similar technique. Either way, we're going to spend about 30 seconds per side, rolling up and down on the hamstring, rolling inwards, rolling outwards. So when you're going on the outer side, it'll be a little more IT band. When you're going on the inner side, it'll be a little more adductor. With the foam roller, you can do a little more dynamic foam rolling, so just slowly moving up and down, working that tissue, also moving the leg just side to side. With the lacrosse ball, you can do a little more of a pin and hold or trigger point release style technique where you can still roll back and forth, but you can also do a really good job of finding a spot that's tight, sitting on that one spot, holding it for 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then moving on to the next spot. With any of these techniques, you can also do what's called an active release, where you hold the lacrosse ball on that designated area that feels tight, and then see if you can move the actual muscle. With the hamstring, it's a little tighter, but if you sit on a box, put the ball underneath the hamstring, you can actually kick the knee out straight forward and then backward. All right, next drill is the hamstring stretch. So immediately following that mobility technique, we're going to lay flat on our backs, grab our hands behind our leg, and then slowly straighten that leg, extending the knee, trying to keep the foot as relaxed as we can. If the toes are pointed down or the calf is flexed, you're probably going to feel this a lot more in the calf, behind the knee, maybe into the sciatic a little bit if you have any tension in the nervous system there or in the nerves themselves. If the foot is nice and relaxed, the foot's pointed straight up to the air, and you're pulling nicely on the upper leg and slowly straightening that leg, you should get a really nice stretch in the hamstring here. I like this one especially because your back is in a nice flat protected position, so you can really isolate that hamstring muscle. You can also do this with a strap or a band. A lot of hamstring drills out there are great, but they do often stretch both the back and the hamstring at the same time. And I'm talking about like the standing straight up and just bending over. You're going to feel that stretch in the back and the hamstring typically, or any of the ones where you're seated, like pancake style stretch, when you're bending over to the side, you're going to feel it in the back as well. So if you want to just isolate only the hamstring, this one where you're laying on your back is a great stretch. Is going to be foam rolling the lower back. So you're going to take that foam roller, start where your upper back is, roll all the way down to the top of the hips. Keep the core tight. You can allow a little bit of extension here, but don't overdo it. You can also roll this slightly to the side, slightly to the right, slightly to the left, or just go through the center up and down, usually spending 30 seconds per side here. And so I do also want to talk about using a lacrosse ball or tennis ball for the lower back, because just like all the other techniques, using the lacrosse ball and using a foam roller, they're pretty similar, but there is some interesting differences when you use it for the low back. So first off, you want to take that lacrosse ball and then put it directly to the side of your spine. So you're not going right directly in the center where the bony part is. You're going off like maybe like 2-3 inches over to the side. You can even go all the way over to like the side, like obliques, like towards the front. So you're gonna lay straight on your back. Put the lacrosse ball basically where you're feeling tight. You can roll around a little bit side to side, front and back. You can use your hands and feet to take some of the pressure off the back, or you can really lean into it if you need to get a little deeper. One other tip that you can do here is grab one knee and then pull that back, and that's going to help basically flatten your back a little bit and reduce that natural arches in your back, which is going to give you a little more pressure if you need it for that area. Now, just like the other lacrosse ball techniques, this is going to be a great way to hold on to a spot that's tight, hold it for 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then move on to the next side. All right, so the next drill that we're going to do here is the lower trunk rotation. There's a really nice rotational stretch that you can do for the lower back. You can make it pretty gentle if you don't bring your knees too deep to the side. This can be a great stretch to do like if you just had a back injury or just threw your back out. Just these gentle rocks side to side can do a lot. Just help the back loosen up so it doesn't tighten up too much or you're going to spasm. You can also get a decent stretch out of it if you're tight there, and just in general, let those legs come all the way down to the floor. There's a couple of variations here too. You can use your other foot to get a little more pressure on it, or you give your leg out straight, and then that's going to give you a little more stretch, kind of more of like a supine twist. And also, if you bring your feet a little wider, you get a really nice hip internal rotation stretch as well. All right, next variation we're going to go over is a child's pose. So basically, we just did a rotation side to side. Now we're going forward flexion. So it's going to be a really tried and true great stretch. Gives you a little bit of traction into the low back. So you can think of that similar as like hanging from a bar. You're getting a slight amount of that with a child's pose, which is great. You're really working the lumbar paraspinals really well, into the QLs, both sides, and into the hips. Really good stretch. You can also add a little bit of a side-to-side motion with this. So leaning your body over to the left, crossing your right arm over the left arm, and then vice versa on the other side if you want to really isolate one side of the low back versus the other side. All right, next drill we're going to follow it up with is just a gentle mobility drill to get some movement in there. So we're going to do the cat-cow, also known as cat-camel style drill. So gentle arch and then hollow in each position. This is just going to be a great drill in general, just to work some good lumbar and thoracic mobility, and really cervical, working up through the entire spine. So you're in a universal arcing position, and then a universal flexion or forward position, and just getting light movement there, working each of the vertebrae. You can also do a little side-to-side variation, which is nice, which is moving your whole body in the shape of a C. This can sometimes be a good mobilization technique if you have kind of like a stitch or a knot in the side and you can't seem to hit it with any other stretch. Sometimes the side-to-side variation does work pretty well. All right, so for the next drill, we're going to go into Cobra and variations here. So we did flexion forward, we did side to side, And now the third major position is the extension. So you can either go up into full Cobra here if you feel like you have the flexibility for it. So depending on if you did abs recently, if you're tight in the front, you might feel a stretch in the front muscles there. But for most people, you're going to feel a little stretch in the back. So if it feels like too much, you might want to go just on your elbows instead of that full extended straight arm position. You can also extend up with the head to get a little bit further of just a full body extension there as well. And this is going to be a good stretch just for a lot of low back conditions. There was a guy, Mackenzie, who ran a whole basically technique off of this position and found that this was really helpful for a lot of people to help relieve their back pain, especially in circumstances with sciatica or radiating pain. All right, now that we've done a couple of those drills, time to retest and see how we feel. So we're standing up, slight bend in the knees, feet together, just reaching forward, and see if that's changed at all, whether we can reach a little bit lower or if we feel it a little differently. Maybe if we felt it more in our calves before and now we feel it more in our hamstrings or vice versa. So seeing what kind of changes we made with some of those mobility techniques. Again, some of you might be really hyper flexible and this techniques we just went over may not have affected you too much. You might be in more of the hey, we need to work on more stability category, and but also maybe you did a heavy workout one day and you did get tight. Some of these techniques may be helpful for you. Another way, and long story short, the techniques that you feel are the most effective for you, take those and you can kind of leave the rest. All right, now we are switching gears and moving on to more of the calf and ankle. This is important because this is a huge limiter for a lot of people just in general, but also in their squat mobility. So this is going to be the wall to knee test, or knee to wall test, I should say. So you're going to line up your toe about 5 inches away from the wall. It's going to be vary from person to person, but probably start around 5 inches and then see if you can get your knee as close to the wall as you can without lifting your heel. Now, you may have to move your toe a little bit closer to the wall, or if it's too easy, move your toes a little bit further from the wall, but then just get a rough measurement for how far you are away. And what we're really looking forward here is, are you having a big imbalance from your left side to your right side, or are you feeling like this is a pretty easy test, or are you getting a lot of tightness through the calves or the ankle? You might be some tightness through the front of the ankle, which is more indicative of a joint mobility, joint restriction. And also, even though this is more of a test, you can definitely use this as a stretch as well. So if you're someone who, hey, my ankles are really tight, this would be a good one to kind of just add in before your workouts, during your workouts, as you're getting ready for your squatting, as you get ready for your Olympic lifts. Having tight ankles is definitely something that can limit you as you're going through some of those exercises. All right, next drill we're going to go over is foam rolling for the calves. So with that starting test that we did where you're bending down, touching your toes, if you're getting a ton of tension in the calves and not so much the hamstrings, then this could be a good drill for you. It also could be a root cause coming from the back or the nervous system, but this is a good place to start. So what we're going to do here is grab a foam roller or lacrosse ball, and the technique for this one is going to be pretty much the same. We're just rolling back and forth, side to side with the foam roller, and the lacrosse ball we're doing the same thing, but we can also pin a little better with the lacrosse ball. So if you find a spot that's especially tight, just hold on to that spot for 10, 20, 30 seconds. All right, and following up that calf stretch, we're going to get into the down dog. So we're going to bring into quadruped position, keeping a either slight bend in our knees or keeping our knees straight, depending on where we want to feel the calves a little more, because we're doing this drill particularly for our calves after we roll them out. And then we can just pedal back and forth, get some motion in there, get some blood flow in there. All right, and then we're going to retest. Knee to wall, try that test again, 5 inches away, or try to keep it measurement about the same way you did last time so you can get a good estimate on, did those drills help? Where do you feel it? Do you feel it in the front of the ankle? Do you feel it stretching the calf? And what changed? And maybe if it was helpful, add it to your routine, usually as a part of warm-up before you squat. All right, next up, we're going to go move on to the shoulders. So we're doing a simple shoulder test, shoulder flexion. Obviously, the shoulder is a lot of moving parts here. The analogy for the shoulder is that it's a golf ball and a tee, and it has a lot of degree of freedom. But we're just going to check one motion here. So we're going to keep our arms as straight as we can. Don't bend the elbow. Keep that locked out. And then bring your arm back as far as you can. Some of you might hit this no problem. Shoulders are really, really flexible. Some of you, this might be one of your hardest things that you have for mobility and something you struggle with. So again, the elbow's got to stay straight. If your elbow bends at all, you're cheating this test a little bit, and it might seem easier than it is. But if the elbow is locked out and straight, let that arm come back behind your head and keep the hand relaxed and see if you can just easily touch to the ground, or see if you're tight. Where do you feel it? Do you feel like it's kind of pinchy in the shoulder joint? Do you feel like it's stretching through the lat? Do you feel it in the triceps? Do you feel maybe bunched up into the upper trap, or maybe even like some tightness through the chest? These are all things we're going to explore with the next few drills and see if we can make a change here. And again, if you're someone who's hypermobile, then flexibility and mobility drills may not be the answer. It might be more of a combination of specific stability or scapular retraining or rotator cuff strengthening. Those type of drills might end up being your solution if you're having shoulder pain. All right, so for the first drill we're going to go over is super easy in a CrossFit gym. Other places, maybe not as much so, but you're going to put a band around the rig, loop it around the back of your wrist, and then twist your hand so you can easily just grasp the band. You don't have to do it this way, but it does make it super easy. And then you're just either leaning your body down or you're coming down onto one knee so you get a good stretch through the shoulder. Now this would be a cool combination of, yes, you're going to stretch overhead flexion like the test we just did. You should get some sensation in the lat if the lat's feeling tight at all. You also will probably feel some degree of just traction, as in the shoulder is just feeling it's like it's getting pulled away from you. Now, if you're someone who's had a history of, dislocations or subluxations, then you definitely want to go easy with this one, because this could be an irritating or a tough position for you. But for most people, that slight traction on the shoulder joint is going to feel really, really nice. Especially if it's tight, achy, beat up from a workout, this can be a really nice recovery drill for you. All right, so the next drill we're going to go over, we're going to move over to the thoracic spine. Doing some foam rolling here. Now, I just want to say to start that usually doing mobility work for the thoracic spine, that upper back area, can do wonders for the shoulder. Typically, people who are pretty tight through the shoulder are also tight through the thoracic spine, and vice versa. So if you end up loosening up some of those muscles and improving your posture, a lot of times the shoulder issues that you may be having might clear right up. So definitely not an area to neglect. Getting some good foam rolling through here, getting some good stretching through here, even though it might not seem related to the shoulder joint, definitely can be. So this is going to be very similar to the first foam roller we did with the low back. With one piece that's a little different, you can do the bear hug technique where you cross your arms one in front of the other and then roll back and forth over it. That'll get a little more rhomboids. Or you can bring your hands behind your head like you're relaxing, going to the beach, and then extending more over the foam roller is going to be a helpful technique as well. All right, so next we're going to go over the book opener drill. So this is going to work a little bit of combination, both shoulder and thoracic spine. So we're going to be laying flat onto our side, knees together at about a 90-degree angle to start, and then you're bringing both hands together, and then follow your hand as it crosses your body to the other side. And I mean follow your hand, but follow with your eyes. So move your head with your hand as it comes over to the side. You might get a little snap, crackle, and pop. It's really common in the upper back here, which is great. You're getting some good mobilizations, you're getting fluid movement, you're getting things loosening up. With this drill as well, if you feel like you're not getting enough motion here, you can try a couple different things. You can try to move your knees up a little closer to your chest. You could also put a foam roller in between your knees. You could also do more of a supine twist where that top leg is a little straighter than the bottom leg. All these variations can be helpful. But if you end up feeling like, hey, this is not doing anything for me, I'm not feeling a stretch at all, then you may not need it. A lot of people do get a lot of good stretching here through the upper back, through the shoulder, through the front of the pec. Another nice variation is you can do more of the dancer style position where instead of just going straight over to the side, you can kind of arc your hand over and around your head as it comes down to the other side. All right, so next up we got the upper trap, and we're using the lacrosse ball again here. So this is easily the most common muscle that tightens up on people, and it can definitely affect posture and overhead mobility. So an easy way to do it is just get up to the rig, lean forward, and then using that lacrosse ball, you're just driving that lacrosse ball into the rig, rolling it a little bit, same thing, back and forth, up and down. Once you find a spot that feels good, like it's on a knot or it's tight, hold on to that for 10, 20, 30 seconds. You can also get some cool active release here as well with the rig. So you're basically, once it's on that position, you can lift the arm and just raise it up, kind of just back and forth. Just getting some movement in the arm will help get some additional relief into that arm, into that shoulder, into the upper trap. If you're at home and you don't have a rig to work off of, then you can just basically lean up against the back of a door, back of the wall, or even laying flat on the ground. You can put the ball up into the upper trap there. Those are all valid techniques as well. All right, next we are continuing with the lacrosse ball, this time into the pecs. Same thing as the upper trap. If you're sitting a lot during the day, you're a desk worker, your shoulders are probably going to be at least slightly rolled forward as you're typing. So the upper traps tighten up and the pecs can also tighten up. And this can just obviously lead to additional issues with posture as things get tight in this position. So there's a great technique to do. Same thing if you have a rig, you're going to put the lacrosse ball into that pec area. Usually the upper quadrant is a good place to start, kind of near where the pec meets the shoulder, that upper quadrant, triangle. And then same thing, moving around back and forth, side to side, digging into the spot that feels like it's tight. And then you can do the same thing, just lifting the arm just up and down, just getting some active release in there. Another great drill that's going to just be helpful to loosen up the pec, increase the mobility of the posture, which will help you get some overhead mobility. All right, next we're going to stretch that out. So we're going to get into the scorpion stretch. We are laying flat, face down on the ground, extending our arm out to the side, and then bringing our leg and trying to tap the toe back behind us if we can. If not, just going to wherever feels comfortable. Now, to make this harder, or I should say, to make this a deeper stretch, if you put your arm at a 90-degree angle, you're going to get a nice deep stretch into the front of that shoulder, into the external rotators, into the pec. If you keep your arm straight to the side, that would be slightly easier, slightly less deep. If you bring your arm straight but allow it to come a little bit below 90 degrees, in other words, a little bit closer to your feet or closer to the ground, more of like a V position versus a straight out to the side horizontal position, then that'll be a little bit less of a stretch. But for some people, that's where you need to start, because you just don't have the mobility, and it's something that you can just work on over time, and you never want to force any of these drills. This is a really nice one because you can get your whole body engaged, you can get some lumbar rotation, you get some hips working, so you're definitely killing a few birds with a few stones in this position. So a really nice stretch to add into a mobility routine before you work out, especially if you're going overhead and you need to get those postural muscles stretched out. But again, also working the hips in the back here as well. One other technique I wanted to talk about while we're in this position is the ribs and the intercostal muscles. So sometimes people can get issues with these, whether it's from a workout, whether it's from being sick and coughing a lot. So a couple techniques that can be good for these are either the boxed or the stacked breathing. Now, boxed breathing, many of you have heard of. It's breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds, repeating that for as long as you want to. Sometimes 1 minute, 2 minutes. You can do really 5-10 minutes. That's plenty. And then stack breathing is the other variation there, where you breathe in, hold your breath for 2-3 seconds, breathe in again, hold 2-3 seconds, and then in again one last time, and then you can let all the air out. Really good techniques to work the intercostal muscles. And for the stack breathing, that can be done in both breathing in and also breathing out. So breathing out, hold 2-3 seconds, breathe out again, hold 2-3 seconds, and then out again, hold 2-3 seconds. All right, now we got the retest. So minus the intercostal drills we just did, a lot of those drills will focus on posture, opening up the mobility. So we're going to check it, see if we made a difference, see if you feel it any differently. Take note of what's tight, whether it's the lats, upper traps, pecs, and if any of those techniques made it feel better, then definitely worthwhile adding to your daily mobility routine. All right, next we're going to move on to the wrists. Another really common injury that people have is wrist and forearm, and I would include elbow into that. Injuries, tightness, just general discomfort. Recently, two of the most common injuries I've seen just in general have been tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. Golfer's elbow meaning the inside of your elbow muscles and tendons get really tight and inflamed, and then tennis elbow meaning the outside of the elbow gets inflamed and tight. So for this rest to elbow test, all we're doing here is lining up our fingers just like the knee test, about 5 inches away. That seems to be the average. And then see if you can keep the elbow locked out and straight, and then how close you can get that shoulder to the rig. Now, using a rig is important here. You can't use the wall because your head will hit the wall first. So you need to use a rig or a doorway. So if you line your fingers up next to an open doorway, then you can do this test exactly the same way. So for here, we're looking to see, again, where do we feel it? Do we feel it in the front of the wrist, kind of like a pinchy feeling? Do we feel it stretching the muscles of the forearm, or do we feel like we just kind of get stuck and then we can't go anywhere? So we're going to try this for both wrists, and we're just looking for imbalances too. Is one wrist way tighter than the other? All right, so for the first technique we're going to work on here is just working the tight muscles of the forearm. Basically, you could use lacrosse ball here, but I'm just using my thumb. I think it's the easiest technique to do, and you can really get pinpoint pressure right where you need it. So you're going to dig along the muscles, basically close. We'll start with the golfer's elbow, close to the inner bone where the forearm muscles meet the elbow, and then kind of work your way down, feeling the area. If anything feels like it's a tight or it's a knot, you can dig the thumb into that one spot. Same thing, hold 10, 20, 30 seconds. You can get some active release by moving the wrist and the hand around here, and then move on to find another spot. Now for the tennis elbow, you're going to flip the palm side down, and then the back of your hand will be facing up. And then you can basically use your fingers, and then same thing, find the bony part of the elbow, and then work your way down towards your hand. Same thing, feeling around, feeling for the tight spots. If you feel like you hit a knot, same thing, 10, 20, 30 seconds. You can move the wrists around kind of side to side, and then you can move on. All right, from here, we're going to go over the wrist flexor stretch, which is for that inner side of the elbow, the golfer's elbow. And then all we're going to do here is keep the elbow completely straight, grab our fingers, pull them back towards us. Usually fingers up towards the ceiling is going to be the best position for you here. And then you should feel a nice stretch just in the muscles right on the underside of the arm and into the elbow. Typically just 30 seconds here, doing this once per side. A good stretch to do often if you're tight here. Next stretch, we're basically going to do the exact same thing. Keep the elbow completely locked out straight. Only difference here is we're going to make a fist to start. That's the position you want your hand to be in. Once you have the fist, try to relax your hand and use your other hand to pull your hand down. And then you should feel a nice stretch right over the top of that forearm, extending all the way up into that outer part of the bony part of the elbow. That's going to hit that tennis elbow. Same thing. I mean, some people just tend to get tightness on more on one side than the other, so doing some wrist related rehab drills can also be really effective here to keep a balance there, and also just good drills to keep wrist mobility, especially if you're someone who tends to have issues here with CrossFit or maybe a desk worker with like carpal tunnel. A retest. So same exact test that we did originally. So we're getting up against the rig or getting up against the open doorway, trying to make sure our measurement is recorded from the first time we did it, or at least estimated, so we can tell if we made a difference in range of motion, tell if our flexibility got any better, but also taking note on where we feel it. Do we feel a change in a pinch in the front of our wrist? Do we feel a change in stretching along the back side of the forearm muscles? What do we notice? And then based on that, we can decide, okay, these are some effective drills that we can add into our mobility routine. All right, and next up, we got the hips. So we're going to do hip flexion test. This is going to be a very simple test, laying flat on our back, pulling that knee straight up towards you, and then taking into account where you feel it. So not letting our knee come out to the side, straight up towards you. A lot of times people are either going to feel this in the groin, like stretching through the groin. They might feel it stretching through the glutes or the hamstrings in the back, or you might get a pinch in front of the hips. Now, sometimes people will say, oh, does that mean I have hip impingement? Not necessarily. That might just mean the way your hips are shaped. They would prefer to actually slant out to the side a little bit if you were to do the stretch instead of coming straight back towards you. Now, this is going to be a great test. Again, just take note of where you feel it. If you are someone with something like a hip impingement going on, you'll definitely feel it with something like this. And you can do this as a retest again after you do some of these drills, and then just kind of take note on, hey, did that make a difference? Do I feel like my mobility has changed? Does it feel better? All right, first technique, we're going to go back to the foam roller or the cross ball here. So we're going to foam roll the glutes. So we're going to cross our leg in that figure 4 style position and just rolling back and forth in the glute, rolling side to side. Same thing, using the lacrosse ball if you'd like, just holding it onto that spot. Lacrosse ball is going to be a little more intense, so feel free to put your other foot down on the ground to take some pressure so you're not putting your entire body weight through it. And then just same thing, find a tight spot, hold 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then moving on to the other side. All right, next drill we're going to go over is foam roll and lacrosse ball for the quads. So same thing, we're just flipping over face down, rolling back and forward, side to side, each muscle here. And in general, for foam rolling, I like to spend maybe 20-30 seconds per side. If there's a spot you really want to work at, you can do longer than that. But for just general maintenance, it doesn't really need to be that longer than that. I think a big key with the gym or just fitness in general is efficiency. So I think the common thing that you might hear people say is like, oh, if your warm up takes longer than your workout, what are you doing? And you know, there's some days that's appropriate, but I mean, the more you can stay efficient with what you're doing, just do what's needed and then move on to the next thing is appropriate. So figuring out what techniques are the most valid for your concerns and your issues is going to be, I think, paramount to help you have fun and get in and out of the gym in reasonable times and staying efficient. So yeah, for the lacrosse ball, same technique. You can use your other limbs to kind of like offset that a little bit, so you're not putting your full body weight on there. But again, the lacrosse ball can be just a different enough soft tissue technique if you need to get a little deeper or need to hit a pinpoint style position. All right, next up, we're going to stretch these out. So we're going to start with the pigeon stretch. This will help stretch out the glute, stretch out the external rotation of the hip, I should say. And get a little hip flexion in there as well. So a really nice common stretch, good to do after your workout if you've done a lot of squats, if you've done a lot of lunges, if those glutes they're feeling it. So getting the stretch can be helpful. Or just in general, if you know you're inflexible here and you needed some work, the pigeon stretch can be a great one. 2 tips.
One more stretch. So coming out of that, over against the wall, we're doing the couch stretch. If you don't like a lot of pressure on your knee, grab an ab mat, which is next to the foam rollers there, or grab a foam roller up. We're just going to bring our knee close to the wall.
Keep your chest up. You don't have to bring your chest all the way down to the ground. And you also don't have to keep your knee at a 45 or at a 90-degree angle out in front of you. You can let that knee bend a little bit, like more of a towards you, so you're not putting as much strain in the 90-90 style position if you don't have the mobility for that yet. But it could be something you're working towards. All right, we're coming up to our last mobility technique of the seminar. So basically what we're doing here is the couch stretch, which is going to be a great quad and hip flexor stretch. So a lot of people have tightness in the quads, but even more people have tightness in the hip flexor. And that's just same thing as posture. It's just due to the lifestyle that we live. A lot of people working at desks, a lot of people working on computers. So our hips don't really reach full extension on our day-to-day unless we make them. So a very common area to get stiff. This is one of my favorite stretches. Pro tip, use an ab mat or use a foam roller or a foam pad to put your knee on just so it's less pressure on the knee and it'll just feel better. And then bring your knee as close to the wall as you feel comfortable. And then basically just trying to sit upright, nice and tall. You should feel a really nice stretch just in the front of the quad and front of the knee there. Now, if it feels easy, bring that knee back even closer to the wall and or try to get your chest even more upright and you get a deeper stretch there, or vice versa. If it's way too hard, bring that knee a little further away from the wall and let your chest sink down a little bit until you find a position that feels comfortable. Why does this matter? In CrossFit, you get kipping pull-ups that might be affected, running that might be affected, lunges that might be affected. A whole bunch of movements are going to be affected by lack of hip extension. All right, let's retest it. So getting back into that position, laying on the back, pulling that knee up towards your chest, and just see how it feels. Any difference there? Any less pinching in the front? And any difference side to side with imbalances? Now, this is a good test retest, but like anything, it's not going to cover all your bases. So if you're tight and those stretches and mobility techniques felt good and you didn't notice a huge difference in the test retest, there's other stuff out there to test. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes. Like, if the stretches feel good and you know you need it, don't worry about the test retest as much. But it is just a good rule of thumb that will kind of cover a lot of your bases and is a good tool to guide you through what mobility techniques might be most important to you. But don't take it as a law. Just use it as something to help you as a guide. And that wraps up the mobility seminar. Again, I threw together what I think was the most common conditions that people suffer with in CrossFit, but also just in general fitness, and the most common mobility drills that help people and are effective to do before or after your workouts. But there's obviously tons of other stuff out there, tons of other drills that can be helpful. And I hope that this seminar was just helpful from a point of take what you need, learn a few things, figure some stuff out about your body doing the tests, and also just figure out some drills that you like, or maybe some tips on some drills that you already knew. Obviously, if there are any additional questions that people have, more than happy to talk about it or help you troubleshoot. Feel free to reach out to me through Instagram is probably the easiest way, Strength and Sport PT. You can also reach out to me on Facebook. You can reach out to me via text or on the website, www.strengthandsportpt.com, and be more than happy to reach out and help you with your questions.